Yeah, we're live. There might be some coughing tonight. so just prepare yourself. I'm going to try to get through this, but don't worry, everything's okay. Tonight I want to talk about a couple things. One, right off the bat, for the people, well, we'll announce this when people are here. You saw I put up on the in the comments already. I have a camshaft tonight. This one, it is an Iski cam. It is a 600 lift single pattern, 213, and on a 112. And for some lucky viewer tonight, it's for some lucky viewer, it's going to be $100. So if you're interested in that cam, please let me know in the comments, and then we'll do some like fun thing to try to decide who will get it. So it'd be $100 plus whatever the shipping is. And so that'll be good. I'm going to try to do more of those because I have some. In fact, what I'm going to do here. There is my email address. So if you're, excuse me, if you're interested, let me know. I've got some other used cams like that, ones that we ran on the dyno. I need to get rid of all that stuff. It's taking up space, and I'm also trying to raise the money for my secret projects. So that's your guys' benefit. Somebody needs a camshaft for $100. It's got 5 or 6 dyno pulls on it or whatever. It's otherwise it's basically just brand new. So if you're interested in something like that, you have a stock cam, you need a performance cam, I've got some. So please send me an email. It's all good. But tonight we're going to talk about carb spacers, and the reason for that is I'm editing a video on big block Chevy stuff that I'm doing today, and probably tonight after this. But I'm doing the big block Chevy video, and I came across data actually that I'd forgotten about. I'd forgotten that we had run. We ran this particular bottom end with a whole bunch of different configurations. Let's say we ran it with different kinds of blowers, but also different heads and cams and different intake manifolds and all kinds of stuff. So one of the tests that we did is I ran this in what I would call a semi-mild combination. It's actually the middle of the 3 combinations that we're going to look at. But I ran it with an RPM air gap intake manifold. Usually with big blocks, unless it's the milder version of the big blocks, I don't normally recommend dual plane intake manifolds unless you're doing a 396 or maybe a 427 or something like that, or a stock 454, and you're doing a very mild thing. So a small camshaft or a stock camshaft, that kind of stuff, dual plane is going to be in the right RPM range. That's going to work pretty well. But on any kind of like performance build, you're going to run into, and I'm going to show you this, you're going to run into some situation where a single plane versus dual plane, there's going to be some crossover point where one makes more than the other. And the thing that happens with big blocks more often than not is that the crossover point or the intersection for those is like right in the middle of the RPM range. So you definitely have to make a choice. Is it more top end? Is it more bottom end? Is the gain that you get from the bottom end? Like I would like to see, looking at one particular example that I have, I would like to see, I'd really like to see what happens at the track. Because if we're running from, let's say this is a 6,000 RPM motor and we're running from, the first 1,500 RPM from 3,000 to 4,500, let's say we got a 3,000 stall converter amp, and then we're running from 45 to 6,000, after the shift, do we gain enough 60-foot time to offset? I'd like to see all that. And I don't get I don't get enough chances to see that. The other thing I want to mention is this afternoon, the shirts showed up. So everybody that ordered shirts, I have, in fact, I should have brought one up to show you, but I have the wrong cam t-shirts. I have a bunch of them now. So those will go out. So all the guys that will get it, everybody that's ordered a camshaft recently, all the cams have been sent out. And then right after I got back from taking those over to ship them out, I had a few more orders, which is good. But I wanted to get them all out. But there's 2 or 3 now that are brand new orders that just came in. But all the ones that are recent, except for today, all of those cams have already been shipped. So I just want to keep keep on top of that and make sure that they're all going out. And like I said, now for people that have been waiting, I have the shirts. Now the shirts will go out, and then I'm going to reintroduce the cam and t-shirt like combo deal. And then, as I said, I have some, who wants $100 camshaft. If you are in need of a camshaft, you don't have one for a project, or would like to get one and go, for that kind of deal, I'm just going to get it and store it. I have a couple of different ones that would be good that we've run on the dyno. But on the carb spacer, so we ran this one was on a 496, and we ran a dual plane intake manifold. We ran a Performer RPM air gap, which when you think about it, it's a divided RPM air gap. So it also has the divider cut out on the air gap. That's the way that it comes from Edelbrock. So in a sense, what they've done is kind of put a carb spacer on it for you by doing that. Because what they've done is when you cut the spacer out of the middle, the divider out of the middle that doesn't go all the way up to the carburetor and equally divide the carburetor, what you've done is make it kind of, like a spacer does. It's a common signal now. And it does change the power curve, particularly on dual plane manifolds. When I put and this was an open spacer that we tested on, it was like a 1/2 inch open spacer, 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. When we put those kinds of things like an open spacer on a single plane manifold, they don't seem to make a big difference. We have seen some instances where it's beneficial, but way more often than not, we see a change on a dual plane manifold. Because like I said, you're effectively, especially if you go from a dual plane manifold with a divider that comes all the way up to the bottom of the carburetor, so effectively, evenly dividing the two sides of the carburetor, and you put a carb spacer on there, you're definitely going to see a difference. Now, it might not be a big difference in power. Sometimes it will be a fairly good difference in power, but you're definitely going to see a signal change to the carburetor. And so when you put a spacer on like that, very rarely can you just put a spacer on like that and just have it work without jetting. Unless you were, in this case, unless you were really rich to begin with, and you put the spacer on, and then because you've lost signal to it. So it needs to be, richened up normally when you put a spacer on it. The signal gets better at the top where you're making more power. So it's a fairly complex thing getting the jetting exactly right for the spacer versus a not spacer. But you will definitely have to do that if you put a spacer on, especially on a dual plane. On a single plane, it's probably not going to do anything. So it's not going to change the signal that much, or maybe even hardly at all. And you might not get a big change in power. And even if you do, my guess is you're not going to change. It's not going to be necessary to change the jetting, not anywhere near what it does on a dual plane manifold. But on this particular application, we ran the dual plane RPM air gap, and then this was on an aluminum headed 496, a fairly low compression one, like 8 1/4 to 1, because it was originally built as a boat motor, and also because we were going to be running, a bunch of different kinds of blowers and stuff on it. This thing eventually got a Vortec. We ran a Vortec supercharger on it, so shout out to those guys. Airflow Research heads, Canfield heads, a couple of different 3 or 4 different camshafts, and all kinds of stuff. But we ran it with the RPM air gap, and then ran it without with the carb spacer on it. And this was actually a pretty good gain. This was like 13 or 14 horsepower gain, and it started gaining power at like 4,000 RPM. So 4,000 all the way out to 6,000, we saw a gain with the carb spacer. But the interesting thing, this is something to think about, and I kind of would need to go back and look and see what the let's see, do we have? I'm going to see if we have air fuel here. Dual air turbines. Take a look at the air fuel change here. That's not it. There we go. Okay, and then we change that to the spacer. 12.2. It looks like we jetted it, so we got the air fuel pretty close. Although this thing, looking at it, was a little bit on the lean side at the top on both of them, but they both kind of had a rising air fuel curve with the spacer and without, which means that all we did was throw jet at it to try to adjust it. But the thing was worth a pretty fair bit of power. That was definitely a worthwhile amount. And I would say two things. One, obviously, we had a dual plane RPM air gap manifold. So any kind of dual plane, I think, is going to have more of a change on the carb spacer. And also that this motor needed more flow and wanted to make power in the second part of the RPM range, where the spacer obviously was beneficial on this big block. I think on a big block, you're going to see more of a change because I think that if you look at the manifolds that were made for these things, a dual plane RPM air gap was not made for the kind of power level motor that we had it on, not the displacement and not the power output. I think when they originally designed a lot of these manifolds, they made them for 396s and 427s and even maybe 454s, but more stock kind of power levels. Now we've made pretty good power with some of these motors, and they work, they work fairly well, especially in ported form. But you can see some, because we've done over 600 horsepower with RPM air gaps. But you can see, and I'll show you this in the video. You can see the changes that we get from other style manifolds on a motor that has, decent heads on it and a reasonable kind of camshaft. But the spacers, and this is something that the internet wants too, is that they want all of they want spacers that always work and always do the same thing, or never work and never do the same thing. They want it always to be the thing, and that's not it. I mean, sometimes we like to try spacers on the engine dyno mostly because they're easy to put on, and we have a bunch of them, or Westech has a bunch of them there, so we could put whatever on we want. So as long as we have, put the big enough carburetor studs in there and just slide it on a gasket, we don't have to disconnect the carburetor or anything. We put it on and try it. Oh, it's lean or it's rich or whatever. And then we got to throw a couple jets at it. That's not really, usually that's just one jet change, because we have a pretty good idea on how many jet sizes it takes to get to the change in airfield that we want. So, after you do something for 30 years or something, you get to be pretty good at it, especially Brule, who I talked to today. So shout out to Steve. I got to talk to him on the phone today. It's always good to hear from my buddy. But the difference in intake manifolds on some of these bigger motors was, fairly significant. But when we're on the dyno and we run these carb spacers, we like to, sometimes we even throw a couple of different ones at it. We, throw an open spacer, throw a full 4-hole, maybe a tapered combo or whatever, depending on if we're actually doing, if it's a carburetor spacer, if it's an actual test or a magazine story or a video or something, then we'll set up 4 or 5 of them or whatever and try different ones, and then you can kind of extrapolate from that, because you can't test every one. Oh, let's test a wood one, and let's test a phenolic one, and let's test an aluminum one, and let's do all these things. And then you're looking for these these onesies and twosies, or a percentage of a onesie and twosie in a lot of these cases, where there's no power gain at all, or no change in power. But the guy that wants there to be power is looking, well, look, it was worth 0.6 of 1 horsepower. Like, yeah, that's not a real thing. Let's look for horsepower. Like, this was 13 or 14 horsepower. That's a change. But the thing that it also did in the case of this test is below 4,000, this thing lost low speed power. Yeah, below 4,000 RPM, it started losing low speed power, and that's not unusual. Again, we're fundamentally changing the intake manifold design and making it trend more toward a single plane. And we've taken away some of the dual planiness of the intake manifold by putting the open spacer on it. And the result was, this lack of low speed power. So again, there's no free lunch. You got to we got a good bit of extra power from 4,000 to 6,000, which is right in the RPM range where you would be revving it, during the quarter mile, except for the launch. But would you want to drive around like that? Me personally, if this was my combination and I had it in a Camaro or Chevelle or whatever, I think what I would do is, if I was going to the track, I think I'd put the spacer and a couple of jets in it at the track and do that, because I think it probably would go better there. Because I think this thing is making enough torque that traction would kind of be an issue anyway. So I don't think we need the extra power there. And I think it would run better at the track there, although it would be an easy swap to try. But I think I would drive around without the spacer. I think that I would want the extra power down low that the spacer didn't award me. So let's see what you guys got going on. Got to okay, who needs $100 used cam for their LS build? I expect most people to say no, actually. I don't think that there'll be more people that do that don't. Let's see what you guys got going on here. Eric, what's going on? Taylor. Hi from Maine, all the way out there. Winston, got the intake, looks good, very cool. A lot prettier than I expected. Yeah, it is. That's right. That was a polished one, right? Similar dyno test, 1050 Dominator and adapter on dual plane makes more torque than a tunnel ram. I haven't ever seen that, because I have a tunnel ram compared to the dual plane and the single plane on a 496, and it's the dual plane makes more low speed torque, but not anywhere near the same amount of peak torque. 6-inch spacer, yeah, I think that's. I did the big spacer test on the LS, and we just stacked a ton of them up. I have a Jeep, a Dodge Charger, and an F-150. No big block Chevy engines. However, my stepfather has a 1985 Rockwood camper sitting with the original 454 in it. That's cool. Did they have the 454 in 85 as an original motor? 472 compared to a 500. My grandmother's 72 Cadillac had a 500 4-barrel carb engine from the factory. Yeah, obviously the 500 is going to make more torque than a 472 does. That cam in the intro would be enough duration to pull hard to redline. Yeah, a 213 is not going to be a high RPM cam, so I don't know what you just mean by redline. But oriented towards torque with lowest duration 213 and high lift at 600 on a 112, I can get away with that much lift. Yeah, it is. 600 lift is a pretty good bit. I think if I was designing that cam, I wouldn't have 600 lift. It'd be 550. No brakes. What was your first comment? AJ, what's going on? 224, 234 at 50, 600 lift, 108, 300 CFM heads, 10 to 1, 1000 CFM carb. What else is needed for 1.3 horsepower per cubic inch? What intake manifold do you have, and what's the displacement of the motor? The smaller the displacement of the motor, the more likely you are to get the specific output. About a taller RPM air gap, same plenum design with longer runners with smoother bends. You definitely can make more power with a different version of the RPM air gap. I don't know about taller, but if it changes the port and changes the flow of the port, you would definitely make more power. when I did Engine Masters, the Engine Masters Challenge, I had an RPM air gap. Mine was on a 410-inch Ford Windsor because 410 was the displacement limit. But just like the big block Chevy, that 351 Windsor Edelbrock intake manifold is on the small side, even for performance 351, in my opinion, and certainly for the power output that I was at on my Engine Masters motor. And so we ended up extrude honing it a bunch of times. And then we put a 4150 to 4500 adapter and then ran a 750 Dominator on it. And we did a bunch of cool things. We stacked gaskets on it. I made a divider inside the carb spacer. So we brought the divider up and then trimmed it down. We did a bunch of cool stuff because, you know, we're looking for something very, very specific. In that case, it was average power and average torque in a given RPM range. And so that's all you care about. You don't care about the peak horsepower or peak torque. You just care about this average number. And so all you're trying to do is whittle away at combinations, different things that you can do to your combination to get, you know, more average power. In retrospect, I wish I would have gone tighter than the LSA that I used on the camshafts that I tried. I tried 3 of them. Retired Steve has too much free time. I don't think that that's the case. Will he move or does he start traveling? He's already moved. He's not around Southern. He's not in Southern California anymore. Chris, what's going on? Support from Victor Harbor, South Australia. Recently sold a 396 with an XS 274 solid cam, 568, 578, 110. Edelbrock dual plane. It sounded fantastic. It went pretty good. That would be a good combination on a. I like a small chamber head on the. Oh no, what? Recently sold 396. What head did that thing have on it? That should be a good cam. An Edelbrock dual plane. Did it have? Was it an oval port deal or rec port? What was it? I have no LS, but 3800. Taylor, they're always the wrong cam, right? I had somebody today when I was going over to UPS compliment me on my. I'm trying to get what hand I write. Compliment me on my shirt design today. Will ported heads ramp boost in quicker or slower or have no effect on a large single turbo setup? It depends on what the ported heads do NA. So if they start making more power NA at the RPM range before the boost spools up, then they'll help. There's no way to know that unless you know what they're doing to the NA power output. Hi. If you're talking about like if you look at the test that I did, this is a really good way to pick this. In fact, I was thinking about today, actually, it's interesting. I was thinking about, what are you doing, Brady? Huh? I was thinking about doing a video on another video on things that help response rate. And one of them is cylinder heads. And if you take a look at the power curves that I supply when we do these things, so we have a stock, like on the 5-liter Ford, we have a stock set of heads, and then we have like an Airflow Research 165 or 185 or trick flow head or whatever. And it starts making more power down low enough, and those do, because they always make as much as the stock head does, and then they start making more. Those will help spool the turbo up. What was your cam profile for the 410? I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. I think I tried 3 different ones. They're all fairly high lift. I don't remember what the durations were. And I think that they were like 108 or 109. Do you think high elevation would have a different result when comparing dual plane to single plane manifolds? I don't think elevation is going to change that. I think you're still going to see the relative differences in the effective RPM range of those manifold designs, because it's not a flow problem. I forgot I do have an LS. It's wrong wheel drive though. Is it the is it a GXP or a Monte Carlo SS or something? Chris, it's an oval port, minor porting, 850 carb, no spacer. Put it in a 96 Mercedes. Cool. It was a sleeper until you started it up. You have headers and a healthy exhaust on it, because that's super cool. It's a gentleman's express there. Hawkeye, what's going on? I've got a Mark IV 454, 30 over, Gen 6 heads, Edelbrock dual plane, shorty headers. Okay, I like where this is going. 276 cam. But AFR 265s make more power. Yes, definitely compared to the other heads that are there. Take a look. If you want to get an idea, take a look at the video that I have up where we replace the Gen 6 heads with the Brodex heads on a motor like that. And we did it NA and with a blower. But even the Brodex heads with a very big chamber on them made more power than the small chamber Gen 6 heads. They lost a little power down low. I don't know that you'd see the same thing with the Airflow 265s. I would get the smallest chamber 265s that you can. Nathan, I'm using ported stock LS3 heads in a 408 with 92 millimeter turbo. Local engine builder suggested porting the heads that don't have a reference for how it performed. I don't think you're going to get a bunch there, because that head is already big enough and it already flows enough. So even on a 408, I don't think you're going to see a whole bunch more low speed power on that. How often do patched aluminum heads last over 50,000 miles daily driven? Well, I don't know what you mean by patched. Do you prefer a mild 5.3 LS or a mild 350 small block? That's not a universal question. There's not a universal answer to that. It would depend on what I would be putting it in. 08 Impala SS, very cool. I don't have any more Coyote content on the horizon. I don't have any Coyote motors to test. 3-inch single exhaust. Had the bowling hat on the partial shelf. Nice. Nathan, do you want more turbo response? What's the intake and what's the cam? And do you need a 92 millimeter turbo? Are you using all of it are you drag racing it? Because the right 92 millimeter turbo will support a whole bunch of power. Dogs are on point. Have you dynoed hammerhead, Hemi, small block Ford heads? Patch means aluminum welded holes from overzealous porting. So, excuse me, they're repaired ones. I don't know how bad the repair was, how bad the damage was. Aluminum heads last a long time. They'll last factory stuff lasts a really, really long time. So aluminum is not a problem. So if you did if whoever did the welding and porting and there's still enough material there, they should also last a long time. Just got into the Coyote platform, swapping it in place of the LS. It's a lot bigger and more complicated. LS feels like a dinosaur. The Coyote stuff is impressive. There's no doubt they can make a lot of power. I remember when they came out, I thought it would be cool to have a Coyote in my Mustang. After seeing them in person, I'm like, this looks like a camera motor, which it kind of is, but they do make a lot of power. We owned since 2010, 14,000 on the clock. All that's aftermarket is Doug Thorley headers. I ran Doug Thorley's on my big block that I'm doing this video about. That's the setup I have for half-mile events and roll racing. How much of that turbo are you using? I mean, I don't think I would look at porting the heads. I think I'd look at a more or different turbo. Jesse, I'm happy to help, man. It's like the guys who, lots of guys, I mean, and I'm part of this group too, people who put these, primarily inexpensive turbos on stuff. And we get big power. It's easy to make big power. If you have one S475 and you put another one on, then you're getting up to where you can make lots of power. But a lot of these guys do that, and then they step up to, like a real turbo, like a real Garrett or something. And they're like, oh yeah, this is a whole different thing. This is, there is a big difference between really, really good turbos and the turbos that certainly that I run. How common are Chevy pistons and rods used in small block Fords? I don't know that I've heard of that. S475 is it? It's about 1,000 horsepower turbo, I think. I mean, you might get 1,000 and whatever on the flywheel for the T6 version. Tim, I'm happy to help, man. Richard, have you ever tested cheap rods by Eagle and Scat? The OEM stall I-beams are 4340. How strong are they compared to stock LS or stock better? Well, I think if they're an I-beam and they're 4340, they would be a lot stronger than a factory LS rod or a factory small block Chevy rod. I would think. I don't know how they're not going to be unless they did a really bad job on their design. Making boost from 35 to 72. I would imagine if you're half-mile events that you're having to roll into the throttle or roll into the boost when you're launching that thing, right? 25 pounds of boost. Yeah, that should be all of it. Why don't you go up to a 96 or something? Or a 102? That's what I was thinking, but they're a few hundred grams lighter than an H-beam or performance I-beam. I don't think I would be, I don't even really consider rod weight when I'm selecting connecting rods. Although it was cool having motors that had titanium rods in them. I can't believe how much power some of these, some of the factory stuff has done, like the LS stuff, but even boost on other things. I remember all the builds we did way back in the day. Everything had to have a forged crank and forged rods and forged pistons. And we were talking about like NA builds. Oh, you're trying to make more than 400 horsepower. It's all got to be forged. No, it really doesn't. Drilling and tapping the water pump, a good spot for an aftermarket mechanical temperature sending gauge on the LS. Are you going to be doing the hot side or the cold side? Probably the hot side, right? Because the water pump has both. Because the in and the out are kind of right next to each other. Yeah, that will give you a good temperature reading. 5.4 full-valve navigator engine and GT 500 supercharger, low enough boost for stock bottom end. I wouldn't have any problem if I took a 5.4, especially if you had ring gap in it. I think you could do all of what that supercharger had available. You can get a stock LT crank that's twisted forge new for $350. I know with rods, since guys are making a lot. I think the LT4 version has different journals and slightly stronger material. Again, we look at a stock LS crank at 1,500 horsepower. I don't know, for any kind of reasonable amount of power, it's pretty easy. But if you can get steel cranks for them, you would be able to do even more. If you put a steel crank and forged rods and forged pistons in an LS or an LT, the block would be the next thing that I worry about. So you usually ball hone your junkyard motors? No, not normally. We have on some of them. Some of the Big Bang motors got that, and I have done that. We had to do that to the 4.8 before it let go. We did it because it was one of the cylinders was just filled with carbon. And so I took one piston out, and we had to fix the head and the camshaft and the lifter and all kinds of stuff. But we did it on that one. But not at like this 5.3 that I have, the one that makes 542 horsepower, the one where we gained 200 horsepower from bolt-on stuff. That one's, we've taken the heads off of it because we replaced the heads, but I haven't done anything to the bottom end. People asking a lot of questions about that one. Hey, what, because everybody thinks you're using special stuff. Hey, what lifters did you use? Well, I used the lifters that came in the junkyard motor. Oh, that thing will only make 3 passes and then it blows up. Well, it probably had 200,000 miles when I got it, and it's got more than 500 dyno pulls on it. And I'm sure at least 100 of those are at 7,700 RPM. So it's not going to break. It has, if it did, I would not feel bad about it. I mean, I would feel bad only because it hurt itself, but it's not like it didn't give all that it had. And more than is expected of it. But a lot of the guys, a lot of the internet experts out there are like, oh yeah, you can't do that. I'm like, no, you can. And we've done it. And this isn't the only one that we've done this to. I don't remember I know we've gone to 75 on a lot of stuff. This one has probably had the most runs at this kind of RPM, but these things will go this far. I mean, the rods will, stock rods, it has all the stock stuff, stock block, stock crank, stock rods, stock rod bolts, stock pistons, stock rings, unfortunately in this case, which this thing has some blow by, stock oil pan, stock oil pump, which it needs an oil pump. The whole thing needs to be cleaned out. It's disgusting inside. Every time I change the oil, I'm like, oh, how did all this stuff not just vibrate and find its way into the motor? I have one spacer on my air gap. Milo, come here. I have an AMC 304, Performer 500, Headman's. Put a carb spacer on it. Cool. That's it, Mike. That crank is the same cost as a Ford one. Small block Ford. What's the lightest piston for street strip? I don't know. You have to go down some sort of rabbit hole and start looking at all the piston weights. Again, I'm not the least bit concerned about any of that. Would you recommend a single plane intake for a 60 over 396 with the oval port heads that have been ported 10.5 to 1? A naughty solid lifter cam. Is the duration an advertised number, or is it a 50 number? That's the best part of the LT motors. I asked about Gen 4 heads on the Gen 5 block. The Gen 5 has much more decked sleeve reinforcement. So, Mike, you think that the LT block would take more power than the LS block does? I have a 1-inch spacer on my 454 air gap to help with vapor lock. Yeah, and isolators, we went through that on the truck that we had. We used a fuel cooler on it. Follow-up question, the AFRs have 109 or 112 cc chambers versus the stock. See, that would be better than the 109 cc head would be good. Will the compression drop too much and force my hand into swapping in a dome piston? No, because I think if you take a look at the video that I did on the Brodex heads, those had big chambers. I think that those had 122 cc chambers, 120 or something. So it was a big difference in. Let's see here. Maybe this is no. I don't know what you're doing here. I don't want to do that. Gen 4 454 with a Vortec on it and a Brodex. Stock head. Okay, so the Brodex head started making more power 4,700, and then the stock head made more power before that. Brodex head had about 30 more horsepower, 26 and 55. Yes. The Brodex race ride heads were 120 cc's. So the stock heads, let me make sure here. Yeah, this is a Gen 6. Stock head's 102. So if you have 109 cc's AFRs, you're going to have more than half a point extra compression. I think it'll start making power much earlier than that. I think that the 265 heads are going to start making more power than the Brodex heads even before that. Gen 5 boosted cars certainly make a lot more than I've seen on LS9 or LS3. Yeah, I don't ever recommend guys run either one of those or an LS1 or an LS2 block. If you want to make power, you run an iron block or you run the 5.3 aluminum blocks. What would your recommendation be for a Turbo 4.8? Yeah, stock bottom and 862 heads and a small camshaft, depending on your power output. Then you just pick the turbo to make the power output. Carb spacer adds more power if you add a salad bowl. Yes, that's been proven, right? Should I buy a 350 or get my turbo 350 rebuilt? Well, if you're going to get your turbo 350 rebuilt, then that's a good idea. Have them put a shift kit in it though, so at least it chirps second a little bit, because otherwise, why are you even doing it? Who needs a $100 used cam for their LS? 42% saying yes, 58% say no. Honestly, I thought that the percentage would be much higher than that. So make sure to send me an email if you're looking for a dirt cheap cam. We're looking into AFR enforcers for the small block Chevy. Those are good. It's a flat type of cam, but the springs on the enforcer are safe for the roller cam. There is a difference, TK. There's the roller cam stuff that's going to have more spring rate, and I would be worried about it if it's a brand new flat tappet cam. So you need to see what the rates are. If you're looking at the heads and the head is listed at least by AFR, they're going to give you the spring rates on the cams, but they should also have a flat tappet cam version of that or a flat tappet spring setup. I'd add a 1-inch phenolic spacer to help my 8060-15 454. Realized I was running a deadhead fuel system with my Holly Blue pump. Did you ever, but you found a regulator for it? Good. Did you have a fuel pressure gauge on it to see how much, because if you're running a carburetor, you don't want too much pressure, and you also don't want too little pressure. Just enough. I would like to see. Yeah, TK, just go online, go to the Airflow Research website, and see the different heads, and then see if they list a different spring package for that. If they do, I'm sure Summit will carry it, because Summit's got to be their biggest supplier. Ryan, 7.5 PSI, that's fine. What would be your recommended cam for the Turbo 4.8? Something small. It depends on how much power you want to make. If you honestly, I wouldn't be if it's a daily driver street kind of thing on a 4.8. I wouldn't be adverse to using the stock camshaft in it, or this nice little 213 cam that you can buy for $100 as a single pattern and a 213. I think that might be okay on a 4.8, although honestly, I would wish it was a 203. I have a tired 305 in my truck. What would you do for cheap power? I have 305 videos up. The 305 responds to everything that any other small block does. So a carburetor, an intake manifold, camshaft, ported heads, long tube headers, the right kind of distributor advance curve, all of that stuff. The 305 is no different than any other small block in that regards. I had some trick that I used to do, and I can't remember what it was. A 305 is still a small block Chevy V8, so it still works good. Today also, I went and tested myself again, ran some hills that I had never done before. Didn't think I could, but I ended up making it, so it was pretty awesome. It's always cool to, test yourself and then not stop. 2 more minutes. What's the matter, Milo? I gotta go take care of Milo. Yeah, Tim, it was cool. It was these were hills that when Lisa and I take the dogs and we go walk, I usually try to run the hills like one at a time or whatever. Are you guys hungry? Is that what you're coming to tell me? Is it time? Well, come on up here. Come here. Is it dinner time? Is that what you're trying to tell me? I know it's hot, huh? It's hot. I know. Here comes your brother. Here he comes. Okay, there you go. Chew on my arm, huh? Hello. Hello. Are you gonna come up to what? I know. Here. Hello, Bugs. I know. I will come in just a minute. I will. I know. I will. Come here, Bruno. Come here. Come on up. I know. He was getting all the attention, huh? You're just a camera hog. You just like looking at yourself, huh? Okay, go get Milo. Go say hello to Milo. Golden's awesomeness. Do you know anything about complete eBay 350 rebuild kits? Are we talking about transmissions or small blocks? And in either case, I haven't ever used one of the eBay ones. Although today I did buy something off of eBay, and it's a top secret thing. You're back? I'll come down in a minute. They sell AFR and Forces Bear, and competition products has 8mm valves and Beehive valve train kits. The Beehive stuff works good. And because they have small stem valves, they usually don't take a lot of spring rate. Way back, we went through a lot of testing, actually. I did a lot of testing for the guys at Airflow Research on their valve springs. These were for small block forward heads. When I was doing all my head testing, I'm like, guys, something needs to be done. A lot of these cams, because back then the comp extreme energy stuff was really popular. I'm like, look, the ramp rates in these cams need more spring rate. And so we tried all kinds of things, different spring combinations, different inners and outers and titanium retainers and all kinds of stuff. And so I just gave them all the data on the testing that we did. Not that they're not smart and know what they're doing, but when you can have dyno results, because they've come to Westech a lot for doing lots of testing for a lot of the things that they developed, and it's pretty cool. How do you buy the Lobach truck cam? I put my email up here. Just send me an email, and you just use PayPal. B16 at AOL. The numbers are advertised 254, 264. Okay. So I'll scroll back and look at that real quick before I take off. Yes, a 396. Do you recommend a single plane? Yes, single plane for that camshaft on a 396 with ported oval ports. Definitely. That thing's going to want to rev with the 250, 260 camshaft in it. Prestige, what's going on? You ordered some hot rod parts yesterday? I ordered some hot rod parts today. I ordered some V6 parts also the other day. Lobach truck for a Vortec 350? No, I don't have any of that. I only have Lobach truck cams for LS applications. I don't have any small block Chevy cams. Your Vortec 350 would be an L31. I don't have any of those cams. Just some exhaust parts, but hey, it's little things. I ordered some, got some shorty headers for a 4.3 liter V6. Not because I want to run for shorty headers, but I'm going to. But that's right. Needs it, right? Why are small block Chevy roller cams so much more than bigger core LS cams? Maybe the market. I started welding up the headers I told you about, some of the nastiest looking TIG welds I've ever seen. Well, you saw some of my welds on the hat for the Metro. Prestige, you're going to go to a tube front end. Very cool. Yeah, Mike, mine could really not be. I could not be considered a welder. Those could not be considered welds, really. What I ended up doing is on the inside, I just filled it with silicone. I didn't do it on the outside and make it look like it was a cool weld like I've seen on YouTube, which is very, very cool, where they weld with the silicone thing and then they paint over it and go, yeah, look at that. Look at that. That's a perfect weld. Like, dude, that is so genius. Mine was on the inside, just that I didn't have any, not that I'm really worried about, pinhole leaks or whatever. But I when I was watching the video of the guys showing how the internet does welding, and they showed the guy doing the silicone thing, I'm like, look, I understand he's trying to make that look like a silicone, or making it look like a weld, like it's a nice bead. He's stacking some dimes there. But I was impressed by the bead that he did with the silicone. I'm like, dude, that's because it was nice and even. It looked like a machine had done it. I'm like, dude, my hat's off to that. The welding thing and trying to trick people, I see that. But, just putting the silicone on, having done silicone beads across many China rails and stuff, getting that just right is problematic. Lucky for us, when I'm doing it, it's like, put it on there, put the manifold on, and then in 15 minutes or whatever, after we make a couple pulls, it's coming off anyways. The silicone hasn't even dried. Anyone know how to reinforce the top hat of the Fox platform shock towers? That's going to take some work. All silicone I've ever used ends up everywhere. I'm just happy it doesn't ruin whatever I put back together. Yeah, with me, it tends to get on everything. Especially with the Westech has the big, like, caulking gun size things of silicone. And then the problem is when you squeeze that and then you set that down, the silicone wants to keep coming out because there's still pressure on it. And so I have to keep reminding people, look, release the thing. Press the deal and release it and slide that back. And then when you put it down, set it on a paper towel so that you're not having the silicone come out all over everything that's around it, on all the tools, on anything that we grab, on the rag, whatever it is. There's going to be silicone all over that. And then pretty soon, it's like anti-seize is like that too. It's just everywhere. Mike, I do have shirts. They are actually here. Not only did I order shirts and like I have these are available from Teespring if you want to E = boost cam squared. These are Teespring shirts, so they're available. And also I just got a box of 100 shirts. So, and I have different sizes, and they're the what's it called? In fact, let me just stay right there. I'll go down and grab one. So I've got some, you see, got some rolling cam shirts. You can see here's a stack of them. These are all XLs. I have red and blue, and very shortly I'm going to have another shirt for people that have significant others, for your wives or girlfriends or whatever. It'll be cool. Cool stuff. Mike, if you want these shirts, like I said, I have them in red and blue. You just send me an email. If anyone is near Tracy, California, my family owns a welding shop, Kenner's Welding. I had to promote this with all the silicone talk. See, welding right there. I don't mind if you guys promote stuff. I don't care. That's cool. That's all good. Robbie's Hobbies. So shout out to Robbie's Hobbies for being part of the discussion. Yeah, just let me know. On that note, it is time to go. I'm going to be working on this big block stuff. Lots of cool information there. And this is actually a two-part deal. So we'll do NA stuff and then boosted stuff, as always. It just won't all fit in one video. Otherwise, the video would be really, really long because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. And we all know that I like to talk about it. Finally, we can tell everybody wrong, Cam. That's right. It is. Everyone knows. Anybody that talks to me, or at least anybody that comments on anything that I do, they kind of already know. Next stream, make sure it's in the thumbnail. I will. they already know that the stuff that I have is definitely the wrong cam. And I'll see you guys all tomorrow. I'm coming, dogs. Dang dogs.